Welcome to the Quiverful Adoptions podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Casey. We are two adoptive mamas who have walked in your shoes, so we get it.
We remember the crazy journey of adoption like it was yesterday, and we are so thankful we get to share some amazing stories with you right here from the living room of our office.
Well, actually, we're sitting in the bathroom, but the living room does sound better.
Anyway, none of that matters. We're glad you're here.
So grab a cup of coffee and join us as we dive right in.
Hey guys!
Hey friends, back by the toilet?
We are so excited to be here today. It's sunny outside with a chance of snow.
Insane.
That's welcome to South Carolina weather.
Although it might not be snowing when this podcast launches, so.
Well.
Anyways, have you read the book yet?
I have, yes. It's an incredible book.
Do you know what book I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. This is an incredible book, though. This is the book that Elena Hall helped put together. She found a lot of different adult adoptees, and they all conspired together to write their own stories. It's cool.
Yeah, so you guys are going to love Elena. I just love her story. What started as a project just developed into this huge thing, and I think has the ability to, or the potential to, touch so many lives and all members of the triad. So she's been able to contribute with adult adoptees, like we mentioned. And I know as an adoptive mom, I've gotten a lot out of the book. And I know that birth mothers will too. So no matter where you are on the triad, this is a book you're going to want to go order right now. And you're sure to love it.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Through Adopted Eyes.
You guys are going to love Elena. Stay tuned.
So Elena Hall is a proud alumni of Baylor University, working on her master's degree in social work. Her passion for adoption advocacy stems from her faith and family and her own personal story of adoption. Those who know her best know that she talks very fast and loves ice cream, singing, dancing, white rice, spending time with family and friends, and all the gluten things. But please keep cilantro far, far away. You know, there's actually a study that says that the way that cilantro tastes for different people is in our genetics.
Really?
Do you like cilantro?
I love cilantro.
So Josh says it tastes like soap. And that is apparently a study that they've done, that it's in your DNA. So if you hate cilantro, you're not alone.
Well, let us know, y'all. Go comment on our Instagram page and let us know what cilantro tastes like to you.
Hey, Elena.
Hey.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
No problem. I'm so excited.
Yes. Well, let's just jump right in. Tell us who you are and a little bit about your story and why you decided to write Through Adopted Eyes.
Yes. Okay. So I was born in Russia in 1993, and I was adopted in 1995. And then I also have a sister who's not biologically related to me, but she was also born in Russia. She was born a month after I was adopted, and then my parents went back to Russia 1 year later and got her. So it's just the four of us, and my family is wonderful. I got a Bachelor of Arts in Religion from Baylor in 2016, and then after I graduated, I was going to work for a church or a ministry, and I just kept having some really cool conversations with people about adoption, or there'd be times where random people would ask about adoption, and so it just kind of kept, whispering in my ear, almost annoyingly. And so I was like, you know what, I need to do something about that. And so I posted on Facebook in the fall of 2016 and just said, hey, I want to let people know more about adoption. It's a topic that people are interested in, but a lot of people just don't know what's appropriate to ask, or they just don't know what it's like to be adopted. And it's very hard to explain what being adopted is like. But I just posted on Facebook and said, hey, let's turn this into something. I didn't know what it would be. And now the book has 50 adoptees in it.
Wow.
And it's just so exciting.
Incredible.
So how many adoptees did you start out with that wanted to share their story? And then how many didn't follow through, or you had to dwindle it down?
Yeah, I think within the first 24 hours of a Facebook post, it was really cool to see, who would comment, oh, I have this mutual friend, or you should talk to this person. So I had about 20 people that were interested in hearing from me in the first 24 hours, which is so amazing. I was expecting like 2. So, and so what I did is I sent every adoptee a questionnaire and just a little interview, and all the adoptees in the book got the same list of questions. And I think that really helps just see how different all adoption stories are and really just read through their answers. But I would say there was maybe 52 people, and I think I ended up with 50.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was great because picture being in like a really big group project and actually trying to hear back from 50 other people. And that's why it took about 2 years to publish. So
yes, I hate group projects. That gives me major anxiety thinking about that.
I usually like group projects, but it was a lot. Yeah.
No. Well, somehow in school, when we would have group projects, I would always be the one doing all the work. And so that's just no fun.
Absolutely.
For me, it's more about like, I can't imagine having to rally together all of those people for a group project. That to me sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, every time I got an email with their interview, or anytime I met up with someone or Skyped interviewed someone, it was just really exciting because I kind of started seeing it all come together. And that's what was motivating to get through the project, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that it was fun compiling and hearing all of the stories from other adoptees?
Yeah, it was really cool because my only adoption experience that I know of is my own, right? So I wanted to hear from other people. And that was a really cool experience. And some adoptee stories are very positive, like my own. I've always thought of my adoption very positively, even though there's grief involved with every adoption. And then other adoptees in the book, have a lot of hardship or just a different outlook than I have about adoption in general. So that was really interesting to hear about.
So you said that you're really positive. So how did some people's negativity influence your positive outlook, or did it make you sit down and think in depth more about your personal adoption story? Did it ever make you start feeling maybe a little negative?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first of all, it was really cool to hear how some people would tell me something about their story, and then they would say something like, oh, I've never told anyone that, or, oh, I don't know if I want that in the book. So I think it just showed me how cool it was for one adoptee to connect with another adoptee. And it was really awesome because a lot of the adoptees in their email with the interview attached, or before or after our interviews or something like that, they would say, this has been such a healing process for me to be able to write down all these thoughts. And I really think that everyone in this book put their heart and soul into it because some of these questions are really hard. And so I think I was pretty prepared to hear the ups and the downs because I had already answered all the questions for myself. But then I think it really made me realize that every single adoptee is different. It was definitely hard to hear the negative stories, but I also think that it made me realize that people in society do need to hear the negative as well. I'm positive about my adoption, but unlike when I was little, when I was just naively positive about it, now I'm realistically positive about it. Meaning I have, gone through loss and grief and in some ways I'm still grieving, but at the same time, I'm able to rely on my faith in God and just who He's made us all uniquely to be, to try and help other people get through their hardships. And so I think, just to answer your question, yeah, it was really hard to hear from people that were upset, but it was also really encouraging how well they opened up to me as a fellow adoptee in ways that they might not open up to their own families.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Elena, let's talk a little bit more about the book specifically. As an adoptive mom, just hearing you talk about the Family Tree Project makes me shudder. It brings up all sorts of fears for my children. So can you just explain to our listeners about how you handled both the Family Tree Project and then later in life, the genetics assignment?
Oh my gosh, yes. School projects are really interesting because you have to do them, right?
Right.
So the family tree project, I was in, I want to say 7th grade. And this was still in my naively positive stage where I was just like, yes, adoption, Russia. And I think part of why I'm able to be so positive about it is because my parents were always so positive about it. They never spoke ill of Russia. They never spoke ill of my birth family. That being said, I don't know a whole lot about either of those things. So it wasn't hard for us to speak positively about it just because we don't know a whole lot of the circumstances. So what they do know is, hey, we're a family, and that's pretty positive. So the family tree project, per how you do the family tree project, is you actually have to write the word adopted underneath someone's name if they were adopted. And looking back, I'm like, that's kind of not okay. Maybe someone in the class doesn't know I'm adopted, or maybe someone that's an adoptee doesn't want to put that. Me being me, I was very excited to put adoptee under it. I thought that was just the coolest thing. And I was really excited to learn about my grandparents' history. I definitely had to, though, emotionally take myself out of my own family tree project and just learn about my parents and my grandparents, who I love a lot, and just had to look at their genetic history. I think that was really hard for me, knowing that this isn't mine. But at the same time, it was really cool to learn about people that I love. So I kind of had to separate myself. I kind of had to separate myself from my family, which is ironic because it's a family tree project. And then in 9th grade, there was the Punnett Square assignment. It's the genetic thing where you have to match characteristics from a father figure and a mother figure and see how you got your traits. And so I have blonde hair and blue eyes. And I remember walking up to the teacher and saying, hey, I can't really do this assignment. I don't know anything about my birth parents or how they look. Can I have another assignment? And my teacher just said, well, just picture what they'd look like. And me as a 9th grader, I'm like, well, I've pictured what they looked like, but how is that helpful for me? I mean, not everything in life we should do out of if this is helpful for me or not. But in that moment, it was actually unhealthy for me to think about something that I'm never going to have the answers to possibly. You know, having blonde hair and blue eyes, I pretty much got 100 on the assignment because I just put blonde hair and blue eyes for both of their traits because I don't know. I'm pretty recessive. And so there was I didn't learn anything that day. And so I want teachers to, this is where it would actually be healthy to remove yourself from the project. And maybe, you know, if you're a girl, then you can picture a guy, or you can like draw out of a bucket, like a characteristic that you're going to match with for your future child. Or, you know, you could have a big pass around box with different celebrities in it and see what their baby would look like. It doesn't even have to be you. It just needs to, you know, I didn't even learn any scientific lesson that day because I was so distracted. And then in turmoil, thinking about these people that I'm probably never going to meet who I deeply care for. But I just, you know, I was adopted in the 90s internationally, and it's just a different ballpark. So.
Absolutely.
So talk to us a little bit about your trip to Russia. How incredible that you were able to do a mission trip at an orphanage. Was it not just the most amazing feeling that your life in some way came full circle?
It was amazing, and it was so emotional. I took the Russian language in college, and it was really hard. But I did know enough to kind of get places. And so it was really fun just to hear the language of a culture that was almost mine, to see the people and see, you know, eat the food and just experience life there. And we did get to spend a lot of time in an orphanage. And I would like to think I did my best there to honor and respect and show Christ's love to the people there. But I also had moments where I was in my head and thinking, this could have been my bed. This could have been the food I was eating. This could have been my orphanage director. And I just had to come to a realization that this was not meant to be my life, because that was the only way I could process it and still respect the people that I was there with currently. It was also really hard not to tell people in Russia that I was adopted. How would that help them? You know, that would, I don't think that'd be very helpful for the population I was working with. So I loved being in Russia. It was amazing. Working in the orphanage was incredible. But it was also really emotional. And I, again, found myself removing myself from the current situation. And I feel like that happens a lot with adoptees. We kind of have to have these different dividers in our brain of what's happening.
Right.
Did you know if that was the orphanage that you were in whenever you were little?
So the orphanage that I worked in was not, but I did actually get to take a trip about 4 hours south of St. Petersburg to my birth city. And we got to tour that for a day. We got to see the museums. And then I did get to see the outside of my orphan wing in a hospital where I was for the first year and a half. And that was very, very cool. And one of my favorite things, I posted a picture on Facebook of the orphanage building. And the orphanage looks pretty old. The hospital looks very old. And then next to it is a newer building that they're building for the children's hospital. And it's green and gold. And my college colors are green and gold. And so everyone was saying, oh my gosh, it's foreshadowing that you're going to go to Baylor. And at the time I was a Baylor student. So I was just laughing at that. And I think that really helped me kind of break the ice emotionally. But I remember stepping outside the van and seeing where I was born. And in my head, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to cry really hard, even though I'm not a big crier, or I'm going to be angry, or all these. I just didn't know how I was going to feel. And I was praying the whole car ride there. And I just felt this like hula hoop kind of, or maybe like a bubble around me with lots of color. And I felt peace. And that was really powerful.
It's incredible. Obviously, your book is filled with stories from other adoptees. Carissa's story in your book really spoke to me because she talked about having, like, despite the fact that she had a great adoptive family, she still faced feelings of being unwanted and unloved by her biological family. Do you have any advice for us as adoptive or hopeful adoptive families out there on how to encourage or speak into those feelings that our children or future children may or may not voice?
Yeah. I think that this is a really hard topic because I think as adoptees, we do internalize feelings first before we might even know what those feelings are. So parents might not notice that their child is having this deep internal, identity and worth battle. I do think every adoptee at some point in their life does need to healthily grieve what happened. In my book, I call this the point of realization. It's the point where you realize, oh, this is what happened. This mostly applies to people who don't remember anything before their adoption and infant adoptees. But I think also for adult adoptees, some of this applies to them. So I know Carissa in her story, she just thought, growing up, is something wrong with me? Why is my birth family not my current family? I don't think she was necessarily saying that to make her family now feel that she felt unwanted, but that's how she felt. And so I think we just need to be there for them and also voice that we understand why they're disappointed, but then also maybe praise the child for letting you know how they're feeling. Because even just voicing that is so confusing. And I even find myself thinking, why did this happen? Because my adoption was international and closed, just like quite a few of the adoptees in the book, our what ifs and whys are really big and scary. And our brain can get into this circle of unending questions, right? That's not very healthy to get into by yourself. And so I think it's really cool that people now, especially in domestic open adoptions, they have some level of information. So I guess really the best way for hopeful adoptive families to encourage children is just to always be good parents and not make, this might sound like the opposite of what you think I'd say, but not make every emotional decision your child makes about adoption.
Right.
They might just be a tween that's angry at something, right? So I think unless they voice specifically that it's adopted related, don't make every negative thing adoption related, or else they're going to think, oh, I'm doing this because I'm an adoptee. Mm-hmm. Well, no, maybe you're doing that because you're a hormonal teenager, right. So I think that's one really practical way. And also just keeping an open line of communication about adoption, only positively, especially as the kid is very young and starts to grow up, and just knowing that, the parents are always listening ears and always talking positively about their child's race or heritage or ethnicity or anything that can tie them around to their birth families. And even just going back to the school projects, even every time we would learn about Russia in class, I would be so excited and also deeply internalize that was almost mine. You almost just never know when these deep feelings are going to hit you. And when I say deep feelings, please don't think that that's scary. It's just realistic. And so I think talking to other adoptees would also be helpful, but in a really, really genuine way, not like a forced conversation. Like, oh, hey, we found another adoptee for you to talk to.
Right. Yeah, we talk about all the time how it's so important for families to find community for their children. So play dates with other adoptees, seeking out family and friends that either have adopted or are pursuing adoption so that their children can also have community. It's just important. And I think something that adoptive families need to make a priority or else they shouldn't adopt, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm also just so thankful for my sister. I think she's really a big part of why I didn't feel as isolated. And we are so different. We have completely different personalities and, we fought like cats and dogs, but at the same time, now both being in our 20s, we're still young, but at the same time, I think we're both really able to appreciate maybe what we couldn't have appreciated when we were younger.
Absolutely. Your story matters. Creating your adoption profile book is one of the most important aspects of your adoption journey. It is the first and usually only opportunity for you to share your story with a potential expectant family, and Arrow and Root is here to help make that process as easy as possible. Having a professionally designed profile book that is expectant parent focused will help you stand out and bring you comfort in knowing your book communicates who you are as a family in the best way possible. Allow Arrow and Root to help you make a great and lasting first impression. It means everything. So one trend that I felt while reading all of the stories was that jokes are super offensive as well as certain terminology. Honestly, people just say stupid stuff, you know?
Yes.
So for example, like real parents. Can you speak to our audience in the spirit of education and give us some other examples of terminology that is offensive and counteract that with the appropriate terminology?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is don't make adoption assumptions. For instance, oh, this person's kind of weird. I bet they were adopted. I actually heard that on my college campus, and I turned around and said, oh, I'm adopted. And the group of guys were like, okay. And I don't know how successful that interaction was, but I just couldn't believe I heard them say that when I was walking by. Right. I was like, you can't, even like in the back of my yearbook, there was a punchline of, oh, you're adopted as a joke for someone. And I'm just like, that is so sad. I mean, unless the adoptee is making the joke, it's really not funny.
Yeah.
I think this whole thing starts with, it's not even certain terms that are offensive. It's just the way that people do not understand what the word adopted means. People don't understand what adoption means to any of the triad. If a birth mom hears the word adopted, or if an adoptive parent heard the word adoptive, or if I heard the word adoptive, there's just a lot of weight with that word that I think society doesn't understand. I think one of the ways this is shown in our society is through, although these ideas are great for charity, and I like the idea, but it's whenever someone says, adopt a soldier for Christmas, or adopt a grandparent for Christmas, or adopt, for Christmas, or adopt a sick child for Christmas. And I completely understand where they're coming from. They're saying, hey, let's take on a person so we can gift them with resources or joyful gifts this holiday season. Okay, great. I don't like that because you're taking out all of the emotion and weight of adoption. My sister, I'm not as bugged about this, but my sister really dislikes when people say, oh, this is our adopted daughter for the weekend. So like, let's say your child has a friend over and they're staying for a long weekend. Someone might say, oh, this is our adopted child for the weekend. Right. Well, they're not. It's just very frustrating. So yeah, I just think that adopted is a really strong word. And that being said, I don't know exactly what a great alternative would be, but I think maybe they could say support a soldier for Christmas, or support a person in that way. Some of the adoptees in the book, I've never personally had this happen, but a few of them have said that people think, oh, they're your adopted family, so like your step family.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've personally never heard that, but I just thought, well, that's really interesting. And there's nothing wrong with step families. It's just not the same. So again, it goes back to people not understanding what adopted means. I also hear a lot, oh, I want my future adopted child to be just like my own child. What do you mean just like? They are your own child.
Right.
And it's not like I walk around, with my parents and I'm like, oh, hey, this is my adopted mom and this is my adopted dad. Like, how weird would that be? So like, they're just my mom and dad. Real parents is upsetting because, someone says, oh, do you want to find your real parents? Well, one, that's a really deep question you just asked me, and you're probably a stranger that's asked me that. Real parents is confusing because at one point in time, I don't know about right now, but at one point in time, all of those people were breathing. So they were all real at one point.
Yeah.
It's not like my adopted parents or my birth parents are robots. So that's just frustrating. And another thing people say is, oh, you were given up for adoption, instead of, oh, you have an adoption plan or someone made an adoption plan. And I really like that because it really shows the thought that the birth parents had in creating a new life for you. I think this is harder with international adoptees that are older, like myself, because with some people, they were just found on the road. Or, for instance, in my personal story, rights were relinquished, and then my papers just say that no family or extended kin took interest in her, and then I just chilled at a hospital for a year and was really sick. So it's just, I think that it's really encouraging that people are starting to use the language of adoption plan.
Or placed for adoption.
There is a big adoption website that says, don't say closed adoption, say confidential adoption. I actually disagree with this. To me, that doesn't make it any better. You're just reminding me that all that information is confidential. So to me, I don't think that's any better. I don't mind closed. I already kind of know it's closed. So
yeah. I feel like language is one of those things that are going to continue to evolve as we continue to be educated.
Yeah.
What was okay to say at one point is not okay to say now because we have more voices from each side of the triad speaking into it. And so as that becomes more and more a thing where we've got more and more voices speaking in, I feel like it's going to help us narrow down what is the best terminology to use to describe what we're trying to say.
Yeah. And I think one way to do that is just ask the adoptee if what they're saying is okay, because I can't speak for all of us. I think, for instance, I don't mind if someone says closed, but someone else might be very hurt by that. So I just say, just ask. But also at the same time, don't ask an adoptee that you're not very, very close with, hey, do you want to meet your real parents? Or, hey, like, did they die? Or, oh, why did they not want you? People that don't know me have asked me those questions, that have just found out I was adopted. People fire off all these questions as soon as they learn I'm adopted. And it's hard because I am so open and positive about it. As an extrovert, I'm actually really excited to answer, but I have to take myself away from the deep emotions in that point to effectively answer. I mean, how awkward it would be if I just start crying in front of them,
Right. Yeah. So Catherine's story in the book was another one that I loved reading. She had a pretty powerful quote that read, "Being adopted isn't a privilege. We deal with more pain because of the past." And I felt that hopeful adoptive families and really just the country as a whole, naively seem to think or look at adoptees as being lucky or privileged. And as we educate ourselves, we know that that's not the right viewpoint to have. Can you speak a little bit to that point?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, in a way, I do feel privileged or thankful, I guess I should say, that I'm adopted, but I came to that conclusion on my own. That was not my parents saying, you should be so thankful. That was not my friend saying, oh, you should be so thankful. So I think it's really important that adoptees come to that conclusion on their own, or else it's just another decision that was made for them. Again, I'm thankful I was adopted, but in a perfect world, adoption wouldn't be necessary. Everyone would stay with their original family unit. My parents are so wonderful, and I'm also, forever thankful for my birth family too. But I think Catherine is really just getting at that there's so much more than the emotion of thankfulness, and that there's pain too, and that people just need to not pressure adoptees to heal or grieve in a way that society says is okay. So Catherine, she might feel thankful, but she's just saying that while, I'm happy that I have a family, there's so much pain that comes with this. And it's kind of like what we said before. People don't know the weight of what adoption is. And I think she was really just trying to express that.
That's good. That's hard.
Yeah.
What do you think that your parents did really well to help your adoption story be positive? You said that you came to that conclusion on your own, that you made your adoption story a positive feeling. So what do you think your parents did that helped influence that? And how can we help our children also have a positive outlook without pushing them, but just kind of leading them, I guess?
Well, I think especially when the child's really young, lead by example. So whenever you talk about adoption, I think it's okay when they're, elementary school or even, toddlers, to always talk kind of in this naive positivity of, we love you so much and you're adopted and that's how our family came together. Obviously, you don't want to lie to them in any way. So if a small child asks, well, for instance, my sister, when she was probably 5 or 6 years old, she walked up to my dad and said, why did my birth parents not want me? And I remember my dad, he tells me later, he was like, oh my gosh, that was big emotions from a small child. So he said, and because my sister and I, we are closed and have very little information, my dad said, we wanted you and we love you. And I'm sure your birth family did too. And it was such a good answer because in no way is he lying. He's not making empty promises, but he was also just encouraging the child in that moment from what they could understand. I think that's that's really important. My parents are also just, they never did anything because we were adopted. Adoption was almost just like a sprinkle on top of everything else. So whereas my grandparents would be like, these are our Russian daughters or granddaughters. But yeah, no, they just always made everything about adoption open to talking about it.
Was that negative for you whenever your grandparents would say, these are our Russian granddaughters? How did that impact your feelings towards your grandparents?
Yeah, I think for me, we always had a really good relationship. So I think for me, it was easy to see that they were just very prideful in how any other kind of grandparents would be. That being said, I did have some family friends also introduce me as my parents' adopted child. And that hurt a little bit because I was at the age where I felt like I should be the person to tell them that if I even wanted to. It was like a very random school event that someone said, oh, and she's adopted. And I was like, okay, and how does that relate to what we're talking about right now? I mean, obviously, this can change with every adoptee, but I think because it was my grandparents and because I knew there was nothing but love in that sentence or in that statement, it was fine. I really didn't mind. I know some other people might be offended by that, but I think, my grandparents were just so wholesome and loving and wonderful that they never said anything negative. So I could not equate that to negativity because they hadn't said anything else negative.
Yeah, that's good. My mother-in-law one time introduced she had all 7 of the grandkids and I was with her. And she said, these are my grandchildren and these are the adopted ones. And I stopped her right there and pulled her to the side. I was like, don't ever do that crap again.
That's so hard.
It is so awful, but she's the sweetest person in the world. And I really don't think that she meant anything by it. And she profusely apologized and cried and was like, I'm so sorry. I don't even know why I said that. They're obviously my grandchildren, but she was just so proud that they're adopted. And I was like, well, but they, at that time they were 4, my twins were 4 and Alame was just a little baby. But I was like, they're old enough to see that you're separating them from the biological grandchildren. And that's not okay.
Exactly.
So she's never done that since then.
Yeah. Well, and I think I like what you said because I think one thing that my grandparents said was, these are our Russian granddaughters. That technically doesn't even say anything about adoption. It's kind of a cool fact. And so I think that's maybe in my mind what separated that instance from the random parent at school saying adopted. And it's not that adoption is negative. It is not that being Russian is only positive. It's just what they equated those words to. So I think for international adoptees, you have a whole other side of this is your birth culture and it's very exciting and all of that. And I think that the way that people introduce me,
you don't want labels. I don't know. I don't like labels. Like if my cousin that's divorced and remarried, she always introduces her stepchildren as her children. And I think that that's the right thing to do. You don't want them to feel different because they're with you every other weekend, you know? So it's just, I don't know.
And children are children, and just like parents are parents, and everybody's real people. And so.
Yeah, I think that it's also perfectly fine to check in with your kid and ask them what part of their story is okay to share with other people. Obviously, this would change with different ages and all of that, but I think that's important too, you know, because in that moment when a parent introduced me as my parents' adopted child, I was kind of confused by that, and I kind of wanted to be the one to share that. But I know that person only meant that out of praise. So I think it's totally fine to check in with your kid and say, hey, was that okay for me to say? And also, even talking about adoption in front of your children should only be positive. And then if the adults want to have another conversation about maybe some hardships or why adoption was part of y'all's family's story, that's fine, but like do it away from the child. And if it's a teenager, then they can completely decide how they want to approach that. But I think that's probably another reason why my parents did such a great job, is because I do not remember them saying anything negative ever about adoption. I really don't. I think they did empathize with my sister and I. I don't mean to say that they didn't say, oh, that is sad, you know, that you feel hurt about not knowing your birth identity. Or I do understand why you want to go to Russia so much. They did empathize with our grief, but they never were like, you know, they never said, oh, Russia's stupid, you know, or they never said, oh, I can't believe we had to adopt, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important.
Well, Elena, what if you had to say just one piece of advice for our adoptive families and our hopeful adoptive families that are listening today? What would be one thing that you would want to tell, I guess, specifically hopeful adoptive parents as they're getting ready to start this process?
Yeah. Oh, just one thing. This is so hard because I feel like, because adoption is just, it's so powerful and it's just so hard to explain what being adopted is like. Gosh, I would say that every adoption is different. So don't judge what a successful adoption is based on one happy adoptee. A successful adoption is someone that can grow up and live in society and connect with other people. And a successful adoptee is also someone that can be really positive about their adoption. I also think a successful adoptee can be an adoptee that could care less they were adopted and it doesn't really affect them at all. I think a successful adoption can be someone who is still working through frustrations that they have, and they might be doing that for a while, but I think the role of the hopeful adoptive parents is to make sure that I think my advice would be to make sure that they're already starting to only talk about adoption positively. And I know that waiting for placement can feel like, 1,000 years have gone by, but I would say just already start to practice how you're going to answer questions. And I think that that's okay. I think false hope is really dangerous, but I think also being prepared is really exciting and smart. I am so excited for all of y'all listening that fit into that category. Yeah, I just think it's so important to not judge or put a unrealistic picture on what a successful adoption is.
Awesome.
Well, Elena, tell us how our listeners can connect with you or follow you on social media, and also how they can purchase your book.
Oh my gosh, yes, please buy it. No. Yes, okay, so the book is on Amazon, and you can just type in Through Adopted Eyes, and it's also on Kindle. I was really excited to get the Kindle out as well, and I'm on Instagram, just at Through Adopted Eyes. And if anyone has any questions, they can email me at throughadoptedeyesbook@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you guys. If there's a fellow adoptee listening that wants to know about my story or wants to talk through some things, please contact me. I also just want to say that the reason why I can be so positive about adoption, again, is just because of my faith in Jesus, and my identity is ultimately in him. And being adopted with all the what ifs and the questions, it can be really overwhelming. But I also know that this is my story for a reason.
Absolutely.
Love that. Well, thank you for being with us today.
Yes, we've loved chatting with you.
Thank you guys so much. This was really fun. I've never been on a podcast before, so this was really fun.
We're glad to be your first.
Yes.
Have you heard about the Promise Summit? If you are out there and you're listening right now and you are hoping to adopt, or you're an adoptive parent, or you're struggling with infertility, or maybe you feel called to adoption and you just have no clue where to start, then you need to be at the Promise Summit. Casey, tell us a little bit about what the Promise Summit is.
The Promise Summit is a Christian conference for couples considering adoption, in the wait of adoption, and or families who have adopted. This event is packed with powerful speakers, incredible worship, and a panel that represents all members of the adoption triad, and is sure to be a weekend that you will never forget. Our hope is that you leave the Promise Summit forever changed and armed with the promises from God that will encourage you throughout your entire adoption journey.
The Promise Summit will be held May 3rd and 4th in Greenville, South Carolina, and we would love to meet you there. You can find out more information at thepromisesummit.com or on Instagram at thepromisesummit.
This podcast is produced by Quiverful Adoptions Incorporated. It's edited and formatted by Matt P. with Pinnacle Audio. If you're interested in learning more about Matt and his services, please visit www.pinnacle-audio.com.